Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. Thank you for joining us. You just joined SheCanCode's live webinar called Being Your Own Authentic Self. I'm your host for today, Kaylee Batesman, the Content Director at SheCanCode. For those tuning in who aren't familiar with us, SheCanCode is a collaborative community working together to tackle the tech gender gap. You can join our community platform to find a supportive network of like-minded individuals, new opportunities, and guidance to help you to excel in your tech career. Now, before I introduce our wonderful speakers for today, please note that we have a live Q&A session running throughout. So please submit your questions and we will try and get to them at the end. So to kick off with my wonderful guests for today, we have a brilliant lineup. We have Angela Bishop, CEO of Zühlke UK. We have Caterina Malfe, Associate Product Manager at Foundry. We have Amanda Smyth, Developer at Maven Securities. And we have Heather Delaney, Transatlantic Entrepreneur, Tech Expert, MD, and Founder of Gallium Ventures. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you all on here. I know you're all very busy ladies, so thank you for taking the time out to have a chat with SheCanCode today. We'd love to kick off with a little bit about each of you, if that's okay, to set the scene. So, Angela, should we start with you?
Sure. So I'm Ange, as was already mentioned, from Zühlke UK. Zühlke is a global technology innovation and transformation company. We're in about 17, 18 locations around the world, and we innovate with our clients to hopefully have a really positive impact on their business, but also society and the planet. A little bit about me. I started my career in software engineering back in the day, over 20 years ago. I was one of 4 women in a class of 200 men at university. That's changed a little bit since then, but not that much actually. So yeah, always happy to try and help bring up the diversity in our teams, because I really believe it helps solve our problems better.
Definitely. What did you study at university?
Software engineering. Yeah.
And very heavily male dominated software engineering. Yes. Fabulous. Caterina, yourself.
Hi. I actually stumbled across the more technological side of animation because I studied animation to be an artist. I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to be an animator or if I wanted to be a 3D modeler. I ended up becoming a support engineer for a storyboarding software, and sort of made my way up from there. And now, yeah, I am associate product manager for Flix, which is a storyboard manager software that Foundry makes.
Amazing. Everybody I speak to at Foundry has the best jobs. You all have very cool jobs that work with really cool artists. So it's always a pleasure to have somebody from Foundry on here sharing what they do. Amanda, yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda, and I'm a developer at Maven Securities, which is a market-making firm based in the city, but with a few offices. I am a developer and have been a developer for about 4 or 5 years or something like that, although I didn't start out my career as a developer. When I graduated, I studied physics at university, and I had a little bit of experience programming there. And in my first job, I was a spreadsheet monkey at the Bank of England. And I got to try my hand at a little bit of programming, kind of got the bug for it. So I did a career pivot, maybe 2 years in, and I've kind of been here ever since. Yeah.
Cool. We love people that career pivot. You are most welcome in SheCanCode's community if you have transitioned and done something else before you ended up into your current job. So definitely would love to hear more about that later. And Heather, last but not least.
Yeah, I'm Heather Delaney, so I'm the founder of Gallium Ventures. Apologies for the horrible accent. I was born in Silicon Valley, live in the UK. So yeah, kind of not the best one. My background is varied. I mean, I grew up in Silicon Valley, where tech is obviously very important. I grew up coding, LAN parties back in the day. And actually found myself into PR. So PR actually can be quite easy, and I found myself doing earlier and earlier stages with products and companies. So Gallium, we do everything from product development and marketing and PR and exit strategies and helping companies kind of get their way out and sell to the right right businesses.
Yeah, growing up in Silicon Valley, that must be quite an experience of, I take it that there isn't a gender imbalance in terms of people going into tech, women going into tech, or is there? Where were you encouraged when you were a child?
I mean, I wasn't necessarily encouraged to go into tech. I think it was naturally surrounding me.
Around you.
Yeah. And it was, growing up, you have friends, parents, their fathers, their mothers who might work within a tech company. Maybe they weren't in, the development side. They might have been in the marketing, in the PR, and in the customer service, but they were part of the tech world. And it didn't actually occur to me that I could work in tech until I moved to London, and I was like, I'm allowed to work in the area that I enjoy. It's changed a lot over the years. Silicon Valley, it's very different from what it once was.
Yes, and a lot of our communities say something similar as well. I didn't know I could work in tech, and I found myself in tech, and actually I'm not a techie and I still work in tech. We love to hear all of those things out of our ladies, and to share with other ladies as well, that you can come in at any point, and there are lots and lots of different jobs within the tech industry as well. So we have a lot to unpack today, so we're going to kick off and we're going to be talking a little bit about being your authentic self at work and why that is so important. So we're going to set the scene a little bit with a question to throw out to the floor. How do you define authenticity, and why do you believe it's crucial for career success? And I wanted to throw in there a little bit as well about some common misconceptions about authenticity in the workplace. Can I throw that out? Who would like to jump in first about, what do you think of in terms of being authentic at work? Any takers? Heather, I can see you smiling.
I'm happy to start if that's helpful.
Yes, Angela.
So for me, it's really about being true to yourself. And I think that then can mean a lot of different things for different people. So everyone will have their own interpretation of it. For me, it's about being comfortable at work and feeling like I can do my best job, and also allowing other people to kind of be authentic and bring their best self to work as well. Obviously in the business sector or any sector that you're in, that means being yourself, but probably with a little bit of polish. That's how I read it for me, because particularly in my role, there's certain things I need to change sometimes to just meet other people halfway and meet different clients halfway. So yeah, for me, it's about being true to yourself, which will be different, but for me, being who I am, with a little bit of polish, and taking on feedback, of course, throughout my career.
Yes, I love that you said polish, because you're absolutely right. I think that's something that when you look at other leaders, you see sometimes that people are very polished and very, especially as you go up the ladder, very executive and kind of dressing for the role that they want. They might be dressing a certain way because they want to be considered for a certain role. But there is that balance of, if you're too suited and booted and polished, people can't connect with you as a leader. So there is that fine balance. How are they going to trust you if you have too much polish, as opposed to being open and, as you said, true to yourself as well? It's definitely
exactly. And I'm definitely not a polished leader of any kind. So yeah, but in some situations, maybe sometimes, and actually being suited and booted, as you call it, makes me feel deeply uncomfortable. I have a couple of blazers, most of them are covered in sequins. So, which is quite different to a typical person. So yeah, it's finding that style that's for you, but yeah, being able to adjust that to the what you need around you.
Yes, definitely. And I love that your blazers have sequins on. Brilliant. The rest of the panel, what do you think? How do you define being authentic at work?
I agree. I think it's being genuine to yourself, not what you think others want of you or want you to be. I'm a naturally curious person, so I will consistently ask questions, as ridiculous as they are. And I think it's often people feel afraid to ask questions, but really that's how you're learning anyways. I think authenticity can be a double-edged sword. It helps people progress because they're learning and they're able to give their honest views and opinions. But at the same time, I think sometimes authenticity can be used in in a corporate sense where it's more of a negative, and it's, you know, an excuse for unfiltered thoughts, and well, you know, I was just being my authentic self. So I think authenticity in communication definitely should be open and honest, but considering, you know, the respect owed to the other party.
Yes.
Actually, on that point of the slightly polished but still to be yourself, I think that was part of my career progression. Was I think I confused being authentic with being impulsive. And I realized that actually, you know, taking those 5 extra seconds to think my sentence through before I say it out loud makes me be more authentic, because I can actually get my message across so much better. And ultimately, it's, you know, there's less miscommunication. I feel better about myself, that I don't have to worry that, you know, I said the wrong thing, or like maybe said it too quick, or overstepped from someone else that wanted to say something. And so just taking those like 5 seconds to count in my head and then like say what I wanted to say gets the message across so much better. I think everyone in my team appreciated that shift.
Yes, definitely. With that as you call it, Heather, being unfiltered, sometimes you are absolutely right, Caterina, just taking that 5 seconds and thinking, also as you move into different positions, is this okay, what I'm about to say, is that okay, or how do I come across to my team, because, you know, would I want to be led by somebody like that? And it can be, as we said, quite a fine balance in finding where that sits. And also not just in leadership either. We had a lady on our podcast who was just so talented and so good at a job, and I remember she said to me, she was so honest, she said, I am a person that gets so passionate about projects that I'm working on that sometimes I have found myself tearful in a meeting. And she said, I had this battle with myself, should I be authentic and just feel tearful and almost, and she said, and sometimes I've cried in meetings, but she said, you have that battle, should I cry in work or should I not cry in work? But she said, you know what, in the end, my team realized I was just so passionate and I so wanted that project to work, and I really wanted my updates and changes to that project to go through, that she said, I'm just going to have to show my authentic self. And she did. And she said her team didn't mind. They just realized that she just was really passionate about what she was doing. But even in leadership, not being in leadership, you almost have to find, do I show my authentic self? And if that is a really passionate person, then there's nothing wrong with that either. It's just finding what works for you, obviously, and that worked for her. Amanda, yourself, what about you? How do you define being authentic in the workplace, do you think? And are there perhaps some common misconceptions about being authentic?
I was thinking about this question beforehand, and I couldn't really think of any misconceptions that I had come across. I definitely wanted to echo your guys' sentiments, and I really appreciate your thoughts on, you know, the boundaries of what, when is taking it too far, like, should I cry in front of my manager whenever I feel like it? And I think that's exactly right. There is not going to be a world in which that boundary is always super clear, especially given that the corporate world is ever evolving. And so it's always going to change, and you're going to always have to think and learn about how to be your authentic self at work as time goes on and as you develop in your career and things like that as well. And thinking about how, in what ways, like, it's important to be authentic at work. Like, personally, I think that one of the reasons it's so crucial is like sustainability. Like, I have found, like, one of the reasons that I did my career pivot was that I was finding in the role that I was in, I was having to kind of force myself to be something that just wasn't me. And a lot of the guidance I was getting from mentors and things like that just didn't resonate, and it was kind of causing a lot of pain and some mental health problems. And so I kind of took a bit of time, thought about what I wanted to do. And, you know, in the last 5 years since becoming a developer, I've been able to become a lot more me, and I don't feel sad about going to work every day anymore and things like that. So thinking about my career long term, I think being able to be authentic is just so important.
Yeah, and finding yourself at a company that allows you to do that, so important, where you feel, as you said, you know, just happy to go to work, that you can be yourself. That there was I'm not sure if they're running it anymore, but there used to be a wonderful LinkedIn advert with the lady that was moving chairs, and I found myself at one point in my life feeling the same way, that it's almost finding your seat at the table, because it's not the same for everybody, and one company works as one person and not for everybody, and that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you or that company. It just means perhaps it wasn't a good fit and you couldn't bring your true self to work. And what do? You end up leaving and you find a good team and a good company that really embraces you for who you are. So obviously it's great that you've now found that, Amanda. Can really grow and develop there.
Absolutely.
Angie, yourself, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, you are a CEO of a big company, so obviously this is a fine balance as well. So how do you balance maintaining your authenticity while leading a large organization? Because it must be quite difficult, right? You don't want to be an open book, but also, you want to share a little bit of you as well. So how do you do that?
Yeah, you're right. It is actually really hard, because there's you're a key person that represents the brand both internally and externally to the company, and that's really, really important for pretty much all companies. And also I need to feel comfortable in what I'm saying when I say it. And you get like things where you might have help to prepare a presentation, and you look at the words and you think, that doesn't sound like me at all, and you have to kind of start again, because obviously otherwise you stand up in front of a group of people and then you think, this just doesn't come across at all, and you're really tense. And I think Amanda's story resonated really closely with one of mine, actually. And I probably went through a very similar journey as well, where I think early in my career, a lot of the people that were around me in the workplace were other men. I had some of them were great role models. I also had some great women ones at the workplace as well. But, predominantly it was very male dominated. I mean, as everyone knows, still is in a lot of cases. But so that meant that a lot of feedback that you get are from men they're really trying to help you. It's always with good intent, feedback of, maybe try this or do that. And then if you just took that feedback on face value, actually you ended up being someone you weren't. And I think what I really learned quite early on, and I was lucky to kind of discover this of myself quite early on. I remember having a really aha moment in about 2008, actually, where I thought, actually, I need to really digest this feedback from how do I take this on board, not what they're saying, but like the kind of behind what they're saying, and how I need to then embrace that feedback and bring it to the surface as me. And I think for me, that was a really good breakthrough to be like, okay, I can make these changes and I can be really receptive to feedback, but I can also turn it into feeling authentic in how I then make those changes. And so really that's sort of what comes out in leading in any team. It doesn't matter whether you're a CEO or a team leader. It's like, how do you think about being yourself, but like what you need to do to like do the job, what people in your team need to hear, like what they want from you, and then obviously taking that on board, and then really digesting that and thinking about how you can deliver that or execute or whatever it is, being true to yourself. And I also agree with Amanda, like it is so exhausting not being yourself. I mean, we've probably already got big jobs, like everyone's got a full work calendar, and then want to go home and have a work-life balance. It is exhausting if you're two different people. And actually, yeah, it just makes it easier in the morning, to get up and continue to be yourself, basically.
Yes, definitely. I love the advice as well of taking on that feedback, but also making it your own. So important. I don't think that's something that we do when we first start in our careers as well, and that's so important when you start to know that, or have the confidence to do that as well. And especially if you then through to leadership and you're getting that feedback from men perhaps in the boardroom who they've all received the same advice from other male leaders throughout their career, and they're probably telling you the same thing, and that doesn't really resonate with you. So you're so right, just stopping and thinking, does that really work with me, or how can I make this my own? Really, really good advice. Definitely. And I do agree, it is exhausting if you are a completely different person at home than you are in work. And we've had conversations on this webinar previously about how long would you stick out a job that you weren't enjoying, and whether or not, you know, you should just go because you might have a gap on your CV, or other employers, future employers might think, well, you know, that person was only there for like a month, you know, what happened there? Was that something negative? And actually, you just need to reframe it as, you know, wasn't for me, I have a reference, whatever it is. But you almost don't want to stay and just mentally, after 1 year, you've just had all of your confidence crushed, and then you move on to your next role.
It's actually a really good point. I think it also is really important during an interview process as well, actually, that actually you don't like say bring yourself to an interview process and then be someone you're not because you think that's what they want you to do in the process so that you get the job, and then actually realize like you then, you know, you're not your authentic self when you get there. And I think actually it's just as important, not just when you're at a company, it's also important when you're trying, you know, maybe making a career move, is to really think about, okay, how do you bring your authentic self to the interview process so that if they're hiring you, they are hiring you for everything that you're bringing. And if they don't want you, actually, then to be honest, it's fine because you were you, and then you weren't a match, and that's fine. And it's better to know that first, and I feel then you don't take it so personally as well if you're your authentic self in an interview. At least that's my personal take. Of course, that's different for everyone.
Yes, definitely agree. And it is a two-way street. If you thought, you know what, I was me, and if I don't fit, then that is absolutely right. That is fine with me as well. So you're right. I think that comes with practice as well. That can be quite difficult when you've just graduated and you're interviewing everywhere. It's quite difficult. Caterina, can you give us an example of how staying true to your principles has positively influenced a project or team that you've worked on?
I have a few examples. I'll try to be brief though. I think the first one that comes to mind is I struggle a lot with imposter syndrome, right? I bet like that's very common. But like Heather was saying before, I'm also very curious, so I can't help but ask questions. And I was actually luckily always prompted to ask questions. And throughout working at Foundry, like I've always had, you know, very sincere managers that like pushed me to like say like, hey, if you feel like you're not understanding something, just ask the right people, you know what I mean? And so now that I've come to a more sort of managerial position, I am still asking the dumb questions, even, you know, even if they sound stupid in my head. And what that's done is actually like it's encouraged other people in my team to ask the dumb questions. So when we are refining a feature that's still in, you know, the design development stages, and we all don't quite know what this is going to look like yet, it helps open up those conversations. Because if me, the person that's bringing the feature over to you guys, doesn't quite know, then it's fine for everyone else to not quite know. So that's one example. And another one, which is more, it's less worky and more like conversational with my team. We're all very open about our mental health issues, house problems. So it's a very particular team, but what this has done is that it's made it very easy for all of us to open up about ADHD, dyslexia. And turns out each one of us in our team has one, but we didn't quite know this at the beginning, right? And it's something that came with like working together. And now even when there's, you know, a new member of the team joining, it is something that we're open about like straight away. And it helps them open up about that. And I think there's something special about not having to lie to anyone in your team as to why you couldn't make that deadline or that piece of work didn't come out quite right. And, you know, you no longer have to stress out about making the excuses. You can just say, it's like, look, it was really rough and this and that, and I'm very sorry. And there's always a solution.
Yes, I find as well your team are when they know that, and you all know that it, for instance, in yours, you all have something in common, that you all help each other more. So somebody can't meet a deadline, or you know, you say something, Yeah, everybody will just pitch in and say, you know what, let's help you because we know why, or we've experienced that ourselves, rather than just kind of leaving you to think, oh, you know, that's your problem.
It feels more like puzzle pieces then, because if you know somebody has dyspraxia or they have dyslexia or ADHD or anything, then you know where you can help support them, and it becomes more of a collaborative effort. And you know, you are pieces of the puzzle to make the big picture anyways.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. And I feel that when you then have challenges, you are more likely to help each other. You're right, Heather, because you fit together as a puzzle when you know each other's strengths and weaknesses. So you just bond as a team, and know everybody's roles off the bat. SheCanCode, we hold hackathons, and I find that at our hackathons that we know each other very well as a team. We function very well as a team because we all, you know each other well and know each other's strengths and weaknesses, and it's so important to have that time together to bond and to get to know each other well. Also, Caterina, I love the fact that you mentioned about asking the dumb questions. So we've had this a few times on our live events and also on our podcast. A lot of our shameless plug for our podcast there, everybody's spilling the tea. But a few of our guests have mentioned the fact that when you go into a leadership role, they have had the worry that they are expected to know everything and they can't ask questions anymore. And that it's like, I got this role. That's it.
Actually ends up being the opposite. Yeah, you
ask
tend
your
to have
team.
to ask more questions. Yeah.
Yeah, and they said that, oh, they all have this internal panic where they go, everybody's looking at me thinking, because I'm the boss, I now know it all. But actually your team, they're the experts. They know what to do. You don't have to have all the answers. And if that comes from the top down, as I said, they see that coming from you, then they know, as you said, that's a great example that they can then ask the questions and ask the dumb questions, as you said. I couldn't agree more. Amanda, I wanted to ask you a little bit about mentors and role models. Do you have any mentors and role models that have influenced your journey towards being more authentic in your own career?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been different ways in which I've kind of come across role models who've been helpful for me, some more useful, some not. So in all the places that I've worked, there's been a mentorship scheme where you get paired up with someone a bit further on in their career and but in my experience, I think especially because I've always worked in tech and finance, it's mostly, well, almost exclusively been dudes, and the experience that they've brought to that kind of scheme has been very much from their own perspective, and kind of advice and guidance that they would give was, I don't know, I just couldn't really relate to it. They had different priorities to me, different ways of seeing and thinking about things, different ways that they approach their careers. And so kind of whenever I would join these mentorship schemes, it wouldn't really stick. And I don't know, our chats would start dropping off and that kind of thing. Never really went anywhere. But I would say in the last couple of years, I've changed my perspective about, what is a role model? Is it someone that goes, I want to be your role model? And you go, teach me everything. Or can you just look around you at people that you respect and admire and maybe see things in common with, and think, okay, I could do what you do. So, for example, I've thought, I could never be a tech lead. That sounds really scary. I'm rubbish at tech. But if I look around at people who are similar in age to me, have similar traits to me and things like that, and they're tech leads, so why the hell can't I? So kind of in the last couple of years, I've started to build those relationships and change my perspective about, what is a role model, or how can I become more like so-and-so person and speak to them about it. So instead of kind of being given a role model, I've gone and sought them out. I've gone the other way around, if that makes sense. And that's been so valuable for me.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with that. There are some wonderful lists that are published in the tech industry with women in tech on, and they have very senior ladies, and it's great, and we need to see what they're doing. But I sometimes, when I've been at events where it's been an awards event, I sometimes look at those ladies and I think I can't relate to those ladies, although they are fantastic to look at. And as we said at the start, they have that polished look, they're an executive, but I can't relate to that. So it can be quite difficult to, as you said, imagine them as a role model and imagine yourself moving into their position. So you're right, finding people around you every day that are doing great things is a really good practical action to take, because I've found role models around me at work that have just been really good line managers, and I look at them and I think, gosh, actually that was a really good tip. She didn't even realize that she was doing something great there, but I took that with me. And you don't even realize sometimes until 10-15 years later, and you think back to a line manager years ago, that you think, oh, I now know why she was doing that, and that she actually was a really good role model for me. And I've suddenly realized, as I've moved into a management role, actually that person was a really good influence on my career, and I didn't even realize. So you're right, they are around you.
Yeah, no, I've actually experienced a really similar thing where my first ever manager when I was an intern was a very kind lady, and it's only really in the last, I don't know, 2 years again, that I've realized why she was so impactful on me. Like, she was a very typically feminine woman, very nurturing, very kind and soft, and I'm kind of like that. I'm quite a girly girl and all these things, and looking at her being able to like flourish and be in that management role she was and still just be this, you know, who she was, I've only really realized how powerful that was kind of very much after the fact.
Yeah, and being her authentic, feminine, soft self in a leadership role. You're right, because a lot of ladies that I have spoken to when they've moved into especially leadership roles, if they're emulating perhaps a lot of men that they have seen behind them, that they think that's what I have to be like. Especially ladies I've spoken to in sales roles, you know, they say I have to be this certain aggressive, very outspoken self, and actually they're not being their authentic self. And normally when you're very, especially sales, if you're genuine, people will buy into that because they know it is you being you, and that you don't have to be that aggressive leader. Actually, Angie, have you found that? Did you find that you went in a certain sort of gung-ho, I have to be a certain way, and then you kind of found your strengths as you were in your leadership role?
Yeah, and I think it sort of resonates too with what the story I was sort of talking about earlier, which is that, you know, I was lucky enough to kind of realize that earlier on, that actually, you know, I didn't need to be like that, because often that was the feedback, like, you need to present more like this, you need to be more like that, you need to dress more like this, and you're just like, no. Yeah, so it's definitely an adjustment, and I think as you move through your career, you need to change different things, and you need to, you know, bed into those new roles that you have, and kind of work with what you've got, and take that next learning curve in your career, and then get the feedback, and then go from there. And I think to build on Amanda's point around mentors, actually, is that I found too that having different mentors for different things in different stages of my career, it's like, there's never just one mentor for you forever. Actually, the different mentors can even at the same time can give you the different perspectives of what you need, because I've actually found some of my best mentors have been men in leadership roles, but often, you know, I combine that with, you know, different role models, maybe with a family, because I've got 2 young kids, you know, maybe having someone like that to help balance the perspective from a different way. So then the combination of that mentorship that then is what you can kind of take on.
Yes, definitely. Yes, role models at work and at home.
Yeah.
Really good balance. Yeah, in trying to find your authentic self. And Heather, what about you? You're an entrepreneur, so can you share any specific instance where your authenticity directly contributed to your business success or your own personal growth?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of comes back to me being just a naturally curious person. So my background is not strictly PR. I worked in pathology. I studied photojournalism. I used to read medical textbooks in my free time. And for me, going into tech specifically and PR and communications, I found I was more curious about what was happening before the PR started. So, you know, why is a product built in a specific way? What's the audience that we're going after? Why is a company even looking for PR? You know, what's the end goal? Is it an exit? Is it to launch into new territories? Is it to build and grow? Because that should be a very different strategy. It might not be PR, it might be marketing or ads or partnerships. And so I was naturally curious in all the earlier and earlier stuff. So I was a co-founder in a very traditional PR agency in the US and the UK. But I was secretly doing the product development and helping with the exits and all the things that I found fun. The PR is just a tactic to get to the end goal. And I'm very honest, I accidentally created Gallium Ventures. I left my job and for various reasons and didn't know what I was going to be when I grew up. So I thought, well, adults have websites, I have to have a website. And I had old clients that immediately approached me because I didn't want to make a big deal when a founder leaves a company. It's usually for a specific reason. People ask questions. I didn't want clients to leave and then, the agency wouldn't have the budget to support my team. So when people were approaching me, I didn't want to work in house and it just didn't feel right. So I was accepting roles until I realized I needed to help. I needed help. I need to hire and I needed more hiring. Oh God, I've just created a new company. And I think it was the point when I realized that I had companies that I've turned down, that I've just given advice to, that were coming to me and asking to work with me, and software companies saying that they really enjoyed working with me. I used to pay for their services and they said, we'll provide it for free for a year, 2 years, however long you need it, because we enjoyed working with you, which I found really weird. And I remember one of them, I was in floods of tears, oh, thank you so much. And I think it was that point that I realized that me just acting like myself is what helped with Gallium Ventures, because I would work with a software company and I'd say, oh, it's good, but you should really do this and it'll make it better, and you can add more money, and here are ways that you can improve the business. And even from an industry approach, I mean, we do PR and marketing and product development and everything, but the PR industry, you can watch AbFab, the TV show, and it's quite fluffy and very fashionable. I'm not. This is the first time I've worn anything other than black in a very long time, and I do walk into rooms with very beautiful glossy PR people, and I love Star Trek. I'm usually in jeans and really muddy boots and a black shirt, so I definitely don't dress for the job that that I partially have, and I feel like it matters, because when I am talking to CEOs, whether it's really large listed global companies or a small startup, I think they realize that I'm asking because I'm genuinely curious, and I'm curious and I'm learning at the same time, and I would have had that curiosity present, and I have an answer to that, and I think they probably respect that a little bit more, because it is that authentic. Well, I don't care if you think it's a ridiculous question, I'm going to ask anyways. If I'm not going to ask it, somebody else will. It might be a journalist.
Yes, and it sounds like as well that once you became yourself and people could just see that you love what you do, people really connected with that. Because I can see a question in here. Someone has asked, is doing what you love very important to being authentic? And actually, it's almost like once you realize you were doing what you love and that came across, you had this kind of happy accident that this company was just kind of born out of doing what you love.
Yeah, I think I mean, our parents and grandparents would have had one career and they would stick with that career whether they loved it or not. We don't have to. We have the benefit that everywhere you work is a case study. You learn something new, whether it's how to deal with a certain personality in management, or if it's even an industry that you like or not. But as you move into other careers and other businesses, they're case studies that you bring with you, that you can say, actually, I've worked in this area, and this is what worked from a sales point of view, from a marketing point of view, from a tech point of view. And life is just a lot easier and it's a lot better, and life is too short to work somewhere you don't enjoy.
Exactly. I could not agree more on that one. Finding somewhere that you do enjoy working at, and also that at the end of the year you feel like you've really achieved something and move forward as well in your career. Ladies, we are running out of time. I have one last question to throw out to the floor before we take a couple from the Q&A. But I wanted to ask you all, what practical steps can women take to cultivate and maintain authenticity in their professional lives? Have any of you found any good tips and actionable steps and actions that people can take within their own careers to be authentic?
If I may, I think the first step is to do it in your private life, to ensure that in your private life, your true authentic self makes it so much easier to be that professionally. And I think still now there's too many of those like ever running questions in your head that, oh, if I say it this way, they're going to think that. If I say yes to this party, then they're going to assume this. If I say no, they're going to assume that. And people do that every day with their friends, with their family. And it becomes so hard to get out of that loop that there's no way you're going to do it in a professional environment. Because that's the last step. Is that the hardest thing to do is to be your authentic self in front of a stranger, in front of a customer. And so you really have to try it out first and be confident in it day to day.
Yes, actually, Caterina, somebody in here has almost echoed what you said. They have asked you a question and they said, like you, Caterina, I suffer from imposter syndrome. Have you got any tips for being authentic and confident in my abilities while dealing with these feelings? And you're right, you said there, it's kind of a, you have to be confident. You have to try it, though. You have to speak up and kind of find your way as you go through your career. But I suppose that would you agree that, imposter syndrome is just something that we all feel, and we all work through it as we go through our professional journeys? Yeah,
I think with time it's gotten better, but there's always like those moments when there's like a hard decision to be made, or like I've just come back from an international event, and I was seeing all these other people that, might be my age or maybe even younger, and this is where they're at and where am I? And the loop goes on, but I think it's important to just call it what it is, talk about it to like the person that you feel most comfortable with at work, talk to them about it. You might find out they have it too, and that always, and then eventually the loop stops. And then there's going to be something that'll trigger it again, but it's all about like learning how to stop it.
Yeah,
it's different for everyone.
I agree. And I think a big part of helping with imposter syndrome is actually accepting and knowing it's okay to be wrong sometimes. And then everyone's going to have moments that they fail or don't do things either the best that they wanted to or the best that other people are expecting you to. And if you kind of can accept that you will have those moments at different levels all the time, actually that really helps kind of deal with the imposter syndrome, because then you can just be like, you can actually ask that question, to other people, like, let me know if you've got a different view, or let me know if you don't agree. And then you kind of accept things straight away. It's okay to be wrong with whatever you said. And then you can kind of work and collaborate with your teams to get to the answer that you all kind of land on.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more with that. And I think as well, on top of that, it's not only it being okay with saying I got something wrong, but sometimes being okay with saying no to something that you're not comfortable with as well. That it sometimes can build, your authenticity in the workplace of what you're comfortable with being asked to do and what you're not comfortable with being asked to do. And I've said this on our webinars before, but I had some really supportive managers in my 20s, and they were just fabulous at pushing me in certain directions and thinking, we're going to try and encourage you in this area. And a lot of that was to do with public speaking. And I was too young to think this is something that I really want to do. I didn't have the confidence, and I always felt like I had nothing to share either, let alone stand up in front of people and, share some big inspiring story. I've hardly been in work many years to share that. So I found myself having to push back on certain things and certain opportunities because I just didn't feel comfortable with doing it. And then throughout my career, obviously, as you get a bit more confident, a bit more experience, then you're ready to say, okay, cool, I'll try this and I'll do public speaking. But it's almost having to find that voice to say, you know what, this isn't for me at this moment in time, and that is okay as well. And most of the time, very supportive managers will just say, okay, we went a bit too soon, too fast there. But yeah, it's almost, you have to speak up sometimes instead of thinking I'm going to have to jump ship. I really wanted to stay at this company, but they're forcing me in a direction that I don't really want to go in. And that can be down to management as well. Not everybody wants to go into management. Some people think that is the worst thing ever. That is a nightmare. I don't want to look after people. They are unpredictable. I do not want to look after people. So there's that as well, that if you find yourself being pushed in the wrong direction, you have to stay true to yourself and say, this is what I want to do, not necessarily what my manager wants me to do. Any other practical steps that anybody would like to add in, anything they've found throughout their career that's been helpful?
I did have, sorry, did you want to go, Heather?
No, go ahead.
It's just a quick one looping back on imposter syndrome. And one thing I found helpful, like another quick in your own head tip, is instead of like looking around you and looking at what everyone else is doing, think about yourself, but like a year ago, 2 years ago, and like what you've learned since then. So if I feel like I'm drowning in YAMLs and I'm really bad at tech, I think actually I barely understood what that was about 3 years ago. So I can't be as stupid as I seem to think I am.
Point. Yes. Also point.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
I think one for me, it kind of loops back to the mentoring. I think, I mean, years ago I was told, because all of my senior managers were always male, and I should really have a woman to look up to, and it turns out she was just going to tell me what it's like if I ever wanted to be a mother and having work-life balance, which wasn't what I needed at the time. And I do think that as you grow throughout your career and you as a person, you reach a certain age where you're like, why did I worry about that? It didn't matter. There are bigger fish to fry. And I think from a mentoring point of view, I'm in the belief that you should have a mentoring board. That, one mentor can't give you everything that you need. You need people who are specialists and knowledgeable in different areas. Maybe one's an amazing manager, maybe one's an amazing accountant, maybe one's amazing at coding, one is amazing at communications. Because you, just like any relationship that you have with somebody, you kind of take the best pieces of a person and you bring it into yourself, and that'll help kind of cultivate you on a professional and a personal level as well.
Yeah, totally. And I also, to build on that, is that mentors also don't have to be more senior than you.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably one of my my things, is actually you can learn a lot from people at every level, and sometimes the grads that you hire into an organization can be just as good mentors as the CEO of a global company, because they're bringing you a different perspective, and I think when people are starting out in their careers, like, you can realize you could actually be a mentor to people that you look up to. People may look up to you, and I think that's really important as well, is not to always think about it being more senior.
Definitely, yes. I've been told about reverse mentoring before, which a lot of people have found so useful, getting feedback from lots of people as well. Heather, I completely agree with the mentoring board. I love that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you are right there, Angie. I just wanted to throw in a couple of questions. There are a few people asking about microaggressions, and there's also somebody asking about balancing being assertive without being perceived as aggressive or a bitch. How can I be true to myself but lead my team effectively? Has anybody come up against that, where you have to find that balance of sometimes you have to deliver some not so nice news, bad news, and you want to come across nice, but sometimes do you have that struggle sometimes? Do I come across as aggressive? Has anybody ever been, I don't want to say being called a bitch at work, but has anybody felt that perhaps they've been too hard on their team, or how have you balanced that?
I think I can jump in. I remember years and years and years ago when I was starting my career, I did an account management and manager course. 99% of it was useless. It was people just complaining about their managers. But there was one point that actually really, really stuck with me. And it's, as you progress your career, you have to lead by example, and you have to ask and tell people what to do. And sometimes you become a micromanager. Sometimes you end up just, piling information down on them. And actually a really good tactic is to ask them, if they say, how do I execute this one thing? How do I build this one area? Then you can say, okay, I'm happy to answer. What do you think you should do? Let them think through the problem, try to come up with a solution. If it's right, then you can actually build their confidence that they're, yes, you're correct. That's right. Good on you. If it turns out they're wrong, I completely understand why you would think that, but actually it might be this. Sometimes that's actually quite a good way to manage people, executing timelines, project management, just a helpful tactic.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely, just framing it in a slightly different way. And you're right, I think that comes with experience as well, and the way that sometimes you might have been managed as well can really feed into your response to somebody else as well. You think if you've been treated a certain way throughout your career, and then you then want to lead by example, as you said, then yes, that kind of sets you up for thinking, how can I reframe this in a different way, how that team member might respond. Anybody else have found it, you know, difficult perhaps when they're leading their team to find that balance between being assertive or coming across as aggressive, and I suppose still being productive as a team? Those challenging conversations do have to take place sometimes.
I had an unofficial goal with my previous manager. It was my yearly wrap-up goal, and it was called when to speak up and when to shut up. That wasn't written in the report, but that was our unofficial name for it. And one thing that I am still learning, because, you know, it depends on every situation, is when is it that you have to be assertive and when it doesn't really matter. Like there's some things it really doesn't make that big of a difference. Do you have to make a point on this, or is it fine to just let it go? And once you start eliminating all of the superfluous stuff, you get listened to a lot more on the very important stuff. But it depends. It's very, it varies between roles. Like, for example, for me, it could be like on the color of a button, you know, that we're building versus a very important like workflow that is a multi-step thing. And if this doesn't work, like, you know, no one can use it. But that's a very drastic example, but there's so many in-betweens there that you can choose from. And sometimes the decision doesn't have to be made right there and then. Like if you feel like you want to give the team the solution, but they could probably get to it like at some other point, and maybe they could get to a better solution, that the one that you have in mind in that specific moment, give it a day or two, and then like circle back on that thing, and you might not have to do anything else.
Yes, yeah, I love that you don't always have to speak up. And you know what, you just made me think of some of the best leaders that I've had are actually the people that don't say much, but when they do speak up, it is something worth saying, and that has kind of built their personal brand as well, and their authenticity of you know, speaking up when they need to, and when they do say something, it is usually very important, and people do take note. Ladies, I'm sorry to say we're already out of time. There are still a few good questions in there that I'm sorry for our listeners that we didn't get to, but I hope we addressed most of your questions throughout this webinar. Thank you so much for taking time out of your days to join us. Thank you to Angela, Caterina, Amanda and Heather for coming on and having a chat with SheCanCode today. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with all of you, so thank you so much.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thanks so much for hosting.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everybody joining us as always. We hope to see you again on the next webinar. Please do shoot over to our community platform. Come in and join our community. You do need to sign up and activate your account. You can do that at community.shecancode.io, or go over to shecancode.io's main website for lots of wonderful content, resources, training, and lots of other wonderful things to help you with your career over there. We hope to see you on the next webinar. And thank you, as always, to our wonderful panel for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you to everybody. We'll see you on the next one. Bye all.
Bye.